Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adventures in History. I hope that you're doing well. I hope that life is treating you as good as it can, and that you are having just lovely times. Matt, welcome. Cave Geek, how's it going? It's a Thursday, but this Thursday has it kind of felt like another Monday, which is kind of weird, right? Okashi, how's it going? Welcome in. Um, I don't know. It's just a little bit weird, but not horrible. Just way busier than I would have expected it to be. Good Monday to you. Yeah, what's up, Robin? How's it going, man? Um, it's been an interesting one. This last week and this week have both been very very busy, and next week also promises to be quite busy. So it's just the busy time of the year. It's right around midterms, so got to do like midterm averages and got to do lots of grading to try to get all the grades in so that I can do the averages and keep up with attendance and also teach. And it's also advising, so I have a lot of advising meetings where students will come in and go like, hey, what am I supposed to be taking? So there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's all good. Twins for Sunday. Yeah, exactly. What's up, Kyle? How's it going, man? But welcome in, everybody. We are still in the process of doing our not necessarily reruns, because we are live. We are not rerunning the episode, but we are like redoing the episodes to make up for lost VODs. And at the moment, this is the last one that I know that I need to make up for the Adventures in History stream. I'm sure there will be more, but we've caught up to the number of videos that I've transferred over to YouTube. In the last couple of days, I have I'm not necessarily focused on history stuff. I've moved over all of the History of Middle Earth streams, if you are familiar with those. So all 12 episodes of those are over there and in a playlist. I'm probably going to move over the 4-part lecture series that I did a couple summers ago next, and then we'll kind of get back to moving history stuff over. Based on my polling just of the people that are watching stuff on the YouTube channel, nobody has caught up to where I'm at yet. So, Tuna being one of the people that I have asked about that. Tuna, thank you so much for being Spartacus for 45 months. That's an insanely long amount of time to be Spartacus. Greetings from work. Oh, wow. Yeah, because you're doing like the abnormal stuff where you're having to drive to set locations and stuff, right? Yeah, not a lot of goodness there, I guess. I don't know. It's work, right? So it's not called fun for a purpose. But late shifts until Thanksgiving. Oh, I didn't know it was that long of a stretch. That's a lot. But anyway, we're filling in the gaps for Adventures in History YouTube channel, and we'll do some viewer requests in the next couple of weeks to kind of fill in gaps in those. And then, yeah, we will, I guess, eventually, theoretically, we'll catch up with all of the gaps in the Adventures in History and viewer request YouTube channel stuff, and we'll get back to doing straight up, full out new content, not just stuff that's new to a lot of people. I know that a lot of people were not around during the first year of Adventures in History, back when we were in single or double digit episode time. So this is probably new for a lot of people, but some people might remember some of this stuff vaguely. If anybody remembers this particular stream that we're about to redo, very, very well, I will be impressed, because this is some complicated history stuff, and there's a lot of moving pieces to this one. And we may as well go ahead and get at it, because we have a lot of people to handle and to deal with tonight. Because this is a discussion about a group of people called the Diadochi, which is a group of generals. And specifically, they are generals of... Well, I guess we got a question here before we get started. Why didn't the people that are called Native Americans ever form an empire, or worse, why didn't they build stone temples like their southern neighbors? Okay, so Native Americans is a very broad term, and that includes people like Maya, Aztec, Inca. I guess you're talking here about like people that were Native Americans that live in the continental United States. And in some cases they did. It just wasn't as big. The biggest thing that drives like collectivization and stuff like that is competition for natural resources. And the natural resources in the continental United States, places like the Southeast, right? They were very, very plentiful, and there was enough to go around. So people didn't necessarily feel the need to build a big walled city that would keep everybody else out of stone. There were a few periods of time where we approached that, where we had really big cities, especially during like the very tail end of the Mississippian period. You will see a lot of the really big sites that had thousands, or in some cases tens of thousands of people living in or around these cities, that would have palisades, which are walls that are made out of trees that you chop down and bury in the dirt. But you don't see a lot of stonework, mostly because stone is a lot harder to find in some of these areas, and you would have seen those had things continued eventually. But the real push here is we don't have a dense enough population in a small enough area that we are going to push innovation that's going to drive us to do things like building walls out of stone. All right. The necessity is the mother of invention, as they say, right? And if you don't need to build really, really strong buildings out of stone because you have everything that you need and nobody's particularly trying to come and steal all of your stuff, you don't really have to get there eventually, right? Now, they did make stuff out of stone. Then they made plenty of stuff out of stone, of course, but it was just tools and things that were designed to be effigies, or things that were, items for trade or stuff like that. So, what's up, Lopta? Good to see you. Is that the case that the civilization of Native Americans as a whole are younger and further the south one looks? It is not the case that civilizations in America as a whole are younger the further south one looks. Cine Semiotics. Also, welcome, Cine Semiotics. Hope you're having a good one. If we look at the Americas, some of the oldest places where we know people were sedentary and sort of perpetually habitated are down here in South America. There's a place called Mount Verde, which is Monteverde, Green Mountain, right? That is down here on the Pacific coastline. That's arguably the oldest site in the Americas where we know there was permanent habitation. And it's potentially, and this gets into like lots of debate about how the carbon dating stuff goes. Theoretically, as old as 26,000 years, which is really, really old for the Americas. But it depends a lot on how we're looking at migration into the Americas and how people are going to disperse across the Americas. But generally speaking, the older civilizations, when we look at continuation of habitation. So we have a site where we know there was a city, but there's a city there forever, right? Those are going to be in Central America or South America down here. You don't see many of those up here. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that when people were moving into this area, it was still very cold. A lot of these areas were covered by an ice sheet for the first, I don't know, if we're showing up here in the 30,000 BC. A lot of the stuff up here was covered by ice for the next 10, 15, even 20,000 years. So the stuff down here in the tropics and in South America were actually more hospitable than basically the top 2/3 of North America continent, right? So the population spread from the Bering Strait to the rest of the continents. That is the prevailing theory. Some people want to argue about some trans-Pacific boating cultures. I don't think that there's enough evidence to support that. Some people are convinced. I'm very, very skeptical. If you're just trying to trace the population spread and compare that trajectory with civilization development, that's an interesting topic, Cinesemiotics. If you want to, if you go to the YouTube channel that I've been building, I think Adventures in History number 3 or maybe number 4, somewhere in the early numbers of the Adventures in History playlist, there will be a discussion specifically about human migration. And I think it's called, Are You Suggesting Hominids Migrate? But I talk about all of the different potential pathways that humans migrate and where we stopped and when we developed civilizations and stuff like that. Now that information is, at this point, 4 years old, and we have made significant archaeological developments and discoveries since then that have pushed some of those timelines around a little bit. So it's not 100% up to date, but it's still a fairly accurate model based on the knowledge that I had when I gave the discussion back in 2020. So you could check that out, and it might... I mean, I know for a fact that I talk about 20-ish minutes about migration into the Americas. So that's how people spread across North America, right? Greyhound. Vanilla Ice did covers. Yes, it was covered by ice. Exactly. The SS Minnow is the true story of Pacific Islanders who get lost in a storm and end up on Easter Island in South America. Yeah. Sydney Semiotics. Thank you very much. There's never any need to donate the bits. I'm here to answer questions. I mean, I appreciate the bits, obviously. Thank you very much for those. But like, I mean, I'm a giant nerd and I love this stuff. So if anybody asks and I can answer, that's actually like paying me by allowing me to ramble about it, right? But thank you so much for the bits. I really do appreciate it. And if there's ever anything else that I can answer for anybody, actually, you can check me out on the Discord, where I'm active just about every day. And I don't mind answering questions there either if you just want to hang out. And we've got a really active meme page and a couple of channels where we share stuff like news and especially history in the news. So, I thought they spread flying on their giant robotic golden condors. Frank, that's a common misconception. They weren't actually condors. They were buzzards. Aloha, Frank. How's it going, man? Good to see you. All right. So, getting back to our main topic, the Diadochi. Who were these people? Well, there's this guy. This guy is Alexander the Great. And you can see this lovely statue of Alexander the Great if you go to the Archaeological Museum in Istanbul. But Alexander was obviously one of the more important figures in the ancient world. He is one of the people that everybody wants to talk about. Currently, the second highest viewership for any video that I have is my Alexander the Great stream. I think it's got like 148 views. Woo! Right? His sister. We'll talk about his sister, Cleopatra, a little bit later on. So I thought I had a picture of her, but it ended up not being the right Cleopatra. It was Cleopatra, who's the daughter of Antiochus, who's a Seleucid guy. But that's a whole other story. What's up, Teresa? Good to see you. Hope you're having a good one. Anyway, Alexander, he had this big empire, right? And he conquered all of this stuff, this just giant mass of stuff. And it stretched all the way over here from Greece and Egypt all the way over into Central Asia. And it's this massive empire that has tons and tons of people. And obviously, what happens is that this attracts a lot of attention. If you've got all this stuff going on, everybody wants this stuff. But while Alexander is still alive, there's a bit of a fight. Cine Semiotics is Spartacus. Cine Semiotics, thank you so much for being Spartacus. Yeah, there are, and I'm not joking here, more than a dozen Cleopatras. And Cleopatra that we know of, Cleopatra, is Cleopatra the 12th, if I'm not mistaken. She's either the 12th or the 13th. Well, let me use the power of the magic light box here. I think it's the 12th. Predecessor. Why won't you tell me which one she is? Oh, I was wrong. She's the 8th. I apologize, everybody. Cleopatra was the 8th. The Cleopatra that pretty much everybody knows. Cleopatra the 8th. Why did I think it was the 12th? I don't know everything, right? Yeah, so like the Elizabeth Taylor Cleopatra, that's actually Cleopatra the 8th of the Ptolemaic dynasty. We'll actually talk about the foundation of that dynasty here in just a bit. My whole historiography mental map just shattered. Well, one of my go-to lines, Cine Semiotics, is that I explode brains on a daily basis. So, if that just exploded your brain, there we go. Cleopatrum. So it'd be Cleopatra. It'd be AE. Cleopatra, I guess, would be the plural of that. Anyway, Alexander, while he's alive, rules this giant empire, right? But here's the thing about Cleopatra, and most of us know this, but if you don't know this, the dude didn't live for a very long time. He died when he was really young. He didn't even make it as old as I am now. He died in his 30s. And it was rather sudden, and he died over here in Mesopotamia at Babylon. And when he died, what happens to all of this? Right? What happens to all of this? Who gets to own and rule and control all of this? And that's what the topic of the stream is tonight. It's basically a giant game of Thrones. And we have all these different players and all these different people that are going to get involved from all of these different angles. And when I originally did this, I had all of their names listed up on a sheet, and we kind of crossed them off as they died or got assassinated. And it got a little crazy because people were getting a bit too attached to their people and expressing quite long diatribes of why they should have managed to win. But the problem is that when Alexander dies, the issue of who's going to take over is a really big question. And part of the problem with who takes over is actually because of the way that Alexander led in the first place. So Alexander was a Macedonian, and he knew that he was a really powerful guy, and he knew that he had a large group of followers, and he knew that he had a really, really big empire, right? And so to keep people from becoming too entrenched in any one area or in any position, he had this sort of rotating pool, if you will. And this is where the Diadochi come in. These are these 12 generals. And they would get moved from location to location. Some of this is job sharing. Some of this is just making sure that nobody gets to set down roots. So some of the generals are going to be out with me. Some of the generals are going to be back home. Some of the generals are going to be in different parts of the empire. Some of them are going to be doing administrative work, but then some of them are going to be doing field work. And then every little while or so, I just shuffle all of this stuff around. And you don't really know who's going to do what, and you can't really plan on where anybody's going to go. So these people were very dedicated to, dodecated. That's a hard word to say. Dedicated to their jobs. They were, Frank, and I appreciate the joke there. But the point here is that we don't really know who's in charge, and there's nobody that's like the one go-to general. And that makes all of them think that they are the next Alexander, right? Is it a misconception that the Roman pantheon remained the same until Christianity? I read on secret cults and deities that are not part of their pantheon. Suppose I'm asking why there was a need for secret cults. That's mostly Vogue stuff, right? Like, people always want to be in on the secret. So when you hear secret cult, think of exclusive club, and that will kind of give you a lot of the right answer. But no, the Roman pantheon was constantly shifting and changing. They had the same core same core group, the same ideology, the same practice. But they were very syncretic. They would adopt new gods very, very easily. And a lot of the Roman gods ended up being like part this and part that. Sometimes they would show up to a place and take over a country, and they would say, oh, look, the head of your gods is actually just an aspect of Zeus, who's actually just an aspect of Jupiter, right? So your god, whose name might be something like Yahweh, no. Your thunder god is actually just a different version of Jupiter, and we'll call him something like, Jupiter Judaiensis or something like that, to denote that this comes from the Judean area or something like that. There are about 15 different versions of all of these big gods, like Jupiter Tonans, the Thunderer. There's Jupiter Optimus Maximus, Jupiter the greatest and most powerful, right? So they're very syncretic. The core beliefs are going to basically stay the same. But they shifted deities pretty quickly. And like one of the biggest mystery cults was the cult of Isis, and that came directly from Egypt, right? So another big mystery cult was the cult of Mithras, and that's a character who has deific origins that go all the way back to like the Indo-Aryan migrations and proto-Hinduism that also laps over into Zoroastrianism from Persia. So, like there's a lot of different stuff that happens there. But Christianity played itself off as a mystery cult to avoid a lot of persecution. So Kashi, we're all trying to catch the bouquet, basically. That's what we're all trying to do. We all want to be the one that's the next to be in charge. That's something every game in existence overlooks. Yeah, I mean, sort of. But not everybody cares enough to learn history like I know history. But that's okay, too, because it takes a lot of time and effort to put all of these strings together. And you kind of have to be dedicated to learning large chunks of history, not just picking one area and digging in this one hole for the rest of your life, which is valid and turns up interesting ideology. But being a generalist is tougher because you can't just say, I don't want to learn that. You have to learn all of it. So that's where I'm at. Anyway, so when Alexander dies, there are some orders that he had sealed and sent off. And these orders were to a couple of different generals. One of them was his general Craterus. And I'm going to show this image here. And it's Alexander, who is here. And here's a lion. And here's Craterus, or Craterus, you can call him whatever you want to. And they are on a lion hunt, showing, look at how friendly we are. We're good friends. We're going to kill this lion because we're also very powerful, right? But anyway, this guy, Craterus, is going to have specific orders to march back to Macedon with a big group of Macedonian veterans. This is another thing that Alexander did quite frequently. He would rotate his troops from the front to the back, and this kept them less likely to rebel. And so Craterus was taking this big army back to Macedonia, and he had these orders, and Antipater, another of the big generals, who I don't have a picture of, had been ordered to leave Macedon and come to Babylon with fresh Macedonian troops. So this is pretty much what we have. This was lots of walking and lots of sailing. What's up, Uncle Bill? Good to see you. Welcome in. You got to go to a Roman villa. That's pretty cool. I've been to a couple of those, but I'd like to go see another. But yeah, if we're leaving Macedon and we're going to Babylon, we're going to probably get on a boat here, and we're going to sail around the coastline to somewhere over here. Probably, maybe, I don't know, one of the cities right here. Probably one of the Phoenician cities, maybe Tyre or Byblos or something like that. And then we are going to walk down and maybe get on a boat here on the Euphrates and then float down to Babylon. What's up, Map Type? We were talking about the Diadochi. Oh no, dude, prehistoric sites are wicked cool. I love prehistory. But anyway, it's a lot of traveling. As much by water as possible, but this is not going to be something that you do in a couple of days. All right. The Diadochi are a group of generals that served Alexander the Great, and we are discussing what happens after Alexander the Great dies. So, we have a couple of orders that are going to be followed, but there's also the problem of the fact that Alexander doesn't have a clear heir. Now, he does have an unborn child, and we don't know what the gender of the child is. I'm sorry, we don't know the sex of the child at this point, because the child, of course, doesn't have sonogram stuff in the ancient world. So we don't know what the sex of the child is. But Alexander's wife, Roxana, is fairly close to giving birth. Now, there's always the question, is the kid the next heir, right? Is the kid supposed to be the one that takes over Alexander's position? What if it's a girl? And then we had to kind of wait. But this is going to be problematic because we need a king like nowish. And is it going to be one of the generals, or does it have to be from Alexander's family? Because Alexander does have a half-brother who is this guy. This is Philip III. And I guess it kind of gives it away that he's Philip III. But Philip III had a really big challenge, and we don't know exactly what was going on with Philip. But the ancient sources describe this guy in a very complicated way. Basically, there's a thought or an interpretation that he had perhaps some sort of either developmental disorder, or maybe he was somehow had some sort of sickness or illness as a child that left him with some sort of potential brain damage, but he was not necessarily in his right mind. He was not capable of making fully adult decisions all the time, because he's described as needing assistance in even kind of basic things, right? So while he is an adult and he's from the family line, he's Alexander's brother, the son of the last king, Philip II, who was Alexander's father. Do we put this guy on the throne? And if so, how do we handle that, right? he's obviously not going to be able to be king by himself. We've also got this question of, is there going to be an unborn heir? And this is going to split the Diadochi. So some of the generals are going to say, what we actually need to do here is wait for the kid to be born. And if the kid's going to be born and is a son, we support the son. If we don't do that, the other side says, well, look, we have a person that's in the royal family already, and it's not uncommon or unheard of for a person that is in the royal family to take over with a regent. What's up, Aristotle? Good to see you, man. Are you all not entertained? Is that not why you were here? Must have been a really short stream for tonight, Aristotle, or maybe I don't know, because I didn't get on stream very early. I was actually a little bit late. Got a raid and run. Thanks for the drop off. Hope that you're having a good one. Welcome in, everybody. My name is Shane. We're talking history tonight, and we are discussing a group of people called the Diadochi, who were a group of 12 generals that were in charge of Alexander the Great's army. And we're discussing what happens after Alexander died. And we're currently in a debate about who gets to take over. And we have two leading ideologies. One of them is that we should follow Philip III, who is Alexander's half-brother that has quite a bit of mental challenge and would not be able to rule on his own. He would need a regent. Or should we wait for Alexander's unborn child to be born before we make a decision about who's going to be king? And the generals have split in half. Mafti, I don't know what any of that is, so I don't have a comment on it. And that's, while interesting, I don't necessarily need to spend the time to go look up what that is to develop an opinion on it in the middle of a discussion about the Diadochi. If you have a question about topic here or adjacent to the topic, that'd be cool. But like completely random stuff gets a little bit distracting in the long run. So what do we end up doing? Well, one of the generals is this guy named Meleager. And he's going to be the one that says, oh, no. What we really need to do is we need to wait for the kid. And his faction gains a lot of support pretty easily and pretty quickly. But he runs square into an oppositional force. I guess I should type all these people. He's not going to make it very long. His name is Meleager. Like this. His group runs into the wrong end of the other generals, and he ends up getting killed himself, and then a lot of the people that were following him get trampled by elephants as traitors to the crown. And what ends up happening is that Philip III ends up being king. And because he needs a regent, we're going to have a regent. And the regent is this guy named Perdiccas. I guess I could type all these people into the notes over here. All right, so who is king? Who is regent? These are where we stand so far. It's relevant because it's about how pre-modern societies form conceptualization of the relation to the world. I'm glad that you know that. I don't know anything about it, so I'm not going to. I don't have an opinion. Anyway, so we get this guy named Perdiccas, who is the leader, who's sort of in charge. But this doesn't make the rest of the Diadochi very happy, because they all want to be in charge. So they have to have this meeting. And they have this meeting, and it's called the Partition of Babylon. And they all go to Babylon, and they figure out, how are we going to break up the empire? Right? What's the What's the right way to do this? Obviously, we're all going to be loyal to the king, but who gets what, right? We got to nail down some territory, and I'm a big, powerful general, and I want some territory. So they decide more or less how they're going to distribute some stuff, but ultimately, it's not necessarily very happy, right? It's not really that happy. And while this is happening, some of the other parts of the empire are going to take this opportunity to try to, I don't know here, what am I going to say? They basically decide that they don't want to be part of the empire anymore. They're going to start into a rebellion. What's the partition formatted as? FAT32? Yes, the old school of partition, right? What's up, Maddie? And Moose, good to see you both. And Tad, good to see you. Plays Game of Thrones music, pretty much, right? What could possibly go wrong, right? Pretty much. So there's this period of time that goes from like 323 to 322, and it's called the Lamian War. And basically what happens here is that Athens decides they don't want to be a part of the empire anymore. They want to go back to being independent. That gets crushed by two of the generals. Craterus and Antipater team up to go basically squash Athens and say, no, you're a part of our country, and that's just the way that it's going to go. But when they do that, they get a lot of momentum, and they go, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe we should get some more from the partition. Again, there's so many of these people kind of floating around. There are all these people kind of jockeying for position. They don't really know who's going to be in charge, who's going to do what. So what really sets this off is this guy. This guy's name is Ptolemy. And Ptolemy is going to do something that makes a lot of people really, really upset. Really, really upset. And Ptolemy steals Alexander's body. Now, Ptolemy had taken over down in Egypt, more or less, and Alexander's body was leaving Babylon, and it was supposed to be on this big pilgrimage back to Macedon, where it was going to be put into the royal tombs at this place called AiH. The modern city is Vergina. It's in modern country of Greece. But Ptolemy sort of intercepts the body, right? No, they were not under Rome's jurisdiction at the time of the Diadochi. So Ptolemy gets the body, and he brings it to Alexandria, and he makes this really big temple for it, and he sort of like starts turning Alexander into a god. And this makes a lot of the other Diadochi very upset, because he's kind of claiming the glory of Alexander, right? He's kind of trying to like maneuver his way into the position. Stealing a corpse is kind of wild, right? And it's not just like any corpse, Rexler. It's literally the body of Alexander the Great, right? So at the same time that this is going on, Perdiccas, who is the regent of the kingdom, also decides that he's going to try to marry Alexander's sister, who is Cleopatra. And if he's the regent and he marries into the royal family, that makes him potentially the next king, right? Or maybe this is him moving himself into a position where he can get rid of Philip III and he can be king. Anyway, this sets off what's called the First War of the Diadochi. And this is from 322 to 320. And they basically just start beating the junk out of each other. Everybody is going to pick a side, and they're all just going to fight. Perdiccas doesn't come out of this very well. He got very quickly abandoned by most of his allies because he had shown a little bit too much, I don't know, urgency. Maybe he had showed a little bit too much desire. He wanted it just a bit too much. He's being a bit too greedy about trying to get into the royal family. And he's going to end up being assassinated by his own allies. So the people that had sided with him initially are going to be like, look, dude, you're getting a little too sketchy. I think you just got to go. So Perdiccas gets the stab, right? Now, this leaves a position open because now we don't have a regent. And we all know that Philip can't really rule by himself. This is not the same Cleopatra Moose. This is a Cleopatra about 300 years before the Cleopatra that you're thinking about. So who then is going to get to be king? Well, Philip's still king, but who's running the show? And the answer here is an interesting mix of people. We all just kind of get to stand in here. And there's not necessarily a regent, but there are going to be people that are kind of overseeing Philip and trying to help him. And Philip's largest supporter is this lady named Eurydice, who is his grandmother. This is also the grandmother of Alexander the Great. And Eurydice likes the fact that Alexander's half-brother is on the throne because this is still her grandson, and she can oversee him and help him because she had been previously married to the king, and other members of her family had been king. So she kind of like gets to be a little bit in charge. But this is going to cause trouble amongst the women at court. Do you think this would have gone any better if Alexander had specified a competent successor prior to death? Yes, I do. I don't think it would have stayed that way, but I think this would have gone way differently if he had. They did share the same genetics. What's up, hydrocannabinoid? Good to see you. The Ptolemies make the Spanish royals look like super normal family tree. They do. We have a whole stream about the Ptolemies that we've done before, and it gets messy, and their family tree starts turning into a family hedgerow, which is about the nicest way that I could say that. He was too young, and he did not leave a will. This is correct. He was very young. Nobody expected him to die, and there was no plan. Family wreath. Yes, it just kind of comes right back around on top of itself. Anyway, so we get this big shift of power, and we have all these people moving around. And when Eurydice takes over as not necessarily regent, but kind of like quasi-regent, things end up going not so great. Because as soon as this happens, Roxana, who was Alexander's wife, gives birth. And it just so happens that Roxana's child is a boy. And this child gets, of course, named Alexander. And now there are people that go, okay, we don't want Philip III on the throne anymore. We actually want Alexander's son on the throne. But here's the problem. Alexander's son is literally an infant. So he's clearly going to need a regent as well. And this is where we get another lady that starts causing a lot of trouble, and her name is Olympia. And this is Alexander's mother. And she had never really gotten along with Eurydice in the first place because, well, they're not related. They're not like mother. They're basically, Olympia is going to marry into the family. She's the wife to the grandmother. So Alexander's dad married Olympia. And Olympia is going to support not Philip, who's not her son. She's going to support Alexander the Fourth, her grandson, who is an infant. But if Eurydice gets to help Philip, because Philip can't rule by himself, why can't Olympia help Alexander rule? Because he can't rule for himself, right? And as you might expect, this causes tension. And there's a whole bunch of backstage wrangling here where the generals are going to line up and they're going to maybe look this way and they're going to look that way. And everybody's trying to test like who's going to jump which way, etc. Zeraniah, welcome in. And also, hey, Chris, good to see you. So who's going to take over? Who's going to be in charge? Is it Philip, or are we going to bring in Alexander the Fourth? You know, this is literally the plot to the court jester. Well, what ends up happening here is a bit of a mess. The big general Antipater, and again, Antipater had been sent back to Macedon at the end of Alexander's life. And so Antipater was the general who had been stationed in Macedon. No, I said that wrong. Antipater was supposed to go to Babylon with new soldiers. So he had to leave Macedon. And he wants to get back into Macedon. And he thinks that he can do this by taking over the throne. But he's going to cause trouble by picking his wrong son for power. And then his son gets very mad. Stuff breaks loose again. And by the time we get to 319, we are going to enter what's called the Second War of the Diadochi. And this runs from 319 to 315. And this gets really messy really, really fast. Because this guy named Cassander, who is a son of one of the Diadochi, thought that he should have been in charge and he should have had all this power. And he thinks that if he can sort of, you know, take over, things are going to be great, but that doesn't go very well. Eurydice gets right in the middle of all of this and is trying to like call shots and get people to do whatever she says. That doesn't go so great because Philip III, the king, ends up getting captured. And they just end up killing him. Just to be honest, they just kill him. It's kind of a horrible thing because, again, he wasn't really super capable of making any of these decisions. He was not in his right mind. I mean, if we're just being honest, the guy was a puppet. But to get rid of the puppet, you can't just like remove him and then like let him retire. If you hope to solve these sort of multi-headed Hydra problems, the only way to solve the problem that they can see, right, is just, you know, they kill him. I mean, yeah, murder is bad, just in general. But they're murdering a guy that didn't ask for any of this to happen, that didn't really know what was going on, and couldn't really make sense of all of this stuff, even if it was explained to him, right? So they're killing someone that's completely innocent in all of this. So it's even doubly bad, right? My favorite, I don't know, that's hard to say. Ptolemy or Seleucus, probably. The flagon with the dragon has the brew that is true. If we're at the Green Dragon, for sure. Bra he got the Peter principle, right? Thanks for the clarification. Murder is bad. Yeah, murder is bad. We should not do murder. Murder is just bad. So Philip is gone. And when they capture Philip, they also capture Eurydice. And they give Eurydice the option of, do you want us to kill you or do you want to kill yourself? And so she ends up killing herself. So Alexander's grandmother is forced to kill herself and his half-brother gets killed. Now, what this leaves behind is an opening for a king and Olympia. And guess who gets put on the throne as king? Well, if you guessed Alexander the Fourth, you are correct. All right, so now we have what's essentially a baby as king of the country. But when we make coins in his name, we don't show him as a baby. We show him as an adult. Because why not, right? So this is Alexander IV as he maybe would have looked as an adult. But again, the kid's like 6, maybe 5 at this point. Where are we at? We're 315, and he was born in like 320. So yeah, he's like 5. He doesn't look like that, right? You know. Anyway, so you got to show him as a big, powerful king, because that's the way to convince everybody that the child that's sitting on the throne and the puppeteers behind him are the ones that are legitimate, right? So the whole concept that we've just gone through is we've gotten rid of one puppet king so that we can put another puppet king on the throne. And Olympia says, okay, cool, I guess I can be the new regent. I can be in charge. I can be kind of happy here. But this guy Cassander, who again had been sort of jilted by previous decisions and didn't end up getting any land, but has an army and is one of these generals, decides, no, Olympia, you don't get to be in charge. So that scenario that we're looking at here lasts for basically a hot minute before Cassander kills Olympia. And then what ends up happening here is that Cassander doesn't necessarily take the title of regent, but he is sort of in charge. And Cassander is going to take Roxana, who is Alexander's wife, and Alexander IV, who is Alexander's child, and he's going to put them in house arrest in this little city in the middle of nowhere, Macedon, right? And so they're in charge, but they are not in charge. Cassander is in charge. Now, this itself is very problematic because you don't really get to put the king in house arrest and then say that you're running everything, because that makes a lot of people really, really mad. Now, the guy that really comes out of the Second War of the Diadochi in this super big position actually ends up being this dude that we haven't talked about yet, is this guy. This guy's name is Antigonus. And Antigonus is going to basically come out with the biggest chunk of land. But he doesn't like Cassander, and he doesn't like Ptolemy, and he doesn't really like the fact that he's not in the big charge. So stuff doesn't last very long here. And his position is powerful on land, but not necessarily powerful in fact. So how do you square this circle, right? If we are big and powerful and we have all this land, but we don't have control, this kind of sucks, right? Antigonus. No, so antagonize comes from antagonist. This is Antigonus. It's all these Greek names, right? Antigonus. So the scenario has shifted, but it's not really a stable shift. Cassander is still pretty clearly like running things. And a lot of people, so this land, crops grow here, right? Yeah. The issue is unstable. Very, very unstable. And Antigonus decides that he's just going to kill everybody. If he can't be in charge and he's not going to be the one actually running things, he's just going to wreck the world, right? And this ends up going pretty badly for him, because when Antigonus decides that he's going to flex his big armies, all of the other Diadochi are just like, does anybody like this guy? I mean, does anybody even really think he should kind of be around? And they're all like, no, this guy's horrible. We didn't even invite him to most of the parties. And so they all decide, we're just going to team up on this guy and beat the crap out of him. Does that sound cool? And everybody's like, yeah, let's just kill Antagonus. I keep saying Antagonus, Antigonus. And they basically send him this letter, and they say, look, you're going to give up all of your territory, and you're going to stop, flexing your muscle around, because if you don't, we're all going to kill you. And he's like, yeah. And his response is this very famous letter that he sends back for them. And it basically says, make ready for war. Right? So it's like ride or die, jokers. We're going to go for it. And this gets really, really, really messy really, really fast. Because when it's one guy versus everybody else, even if you're big and powerful, you're not going to come out of this looking very good. And unbeknownst to him, a lot of these other Diadochi generals had made deals behind his back. And there are lots of these other people. I guess I could put all these people up here. There's this guy who's part of the mix. This guy's name is Lysimachus. He's one of the big Diadochi. And he absolutely hated Antigonus. And then there's this guy who is Seleucus, who is going to basically win this for himself. And part of the reason is because of these things right here. I don't know if you can really see what's going on in the coin here, but I chose this coin specifically because on these coins we have elephants. These are elephants. Now, where would Seleucus have found elephants? Well, that's actually a great question. Seleucus was in control of this area over here, and he had nominal control over Alexander's territory down in India, and they had gone down there and fought some pretty big battles, and some of the last really, really big battles of Alexander's campaign were down in India. And Seleucus thought maybe that he could use India as sort of a treasure box to fund his war against the other Diadochi. And he had taken some armies down there, and the Indian kings had unified under a dynasty called the Maurya, and they beat the poop out of them. And it was because the Indians had war elephants. So Seleucus basically traded his daughter for war elephants. And he had marched them from Asia all the way back over here into Mesopotamia and in Turkey, so that he could bring the smackdown on Antigonus. And Antigonus doesn't come out of this very great, right? It's a pretty big mess. The war here, the third war of the Diadochi, is going to see Antigonus greatly, greatly diminished, utterly humiliated, and in a position where he's not really going to have very much say at all. Out of this big war, and now he gets his licks in too. Out of this third war of the Diadochi, only 5 of the generals are going to be left standing. So through assassination and through dying in battle and span of this. So the third war of the Diadochi is 314 to 311. Speaking of elephants, you were just reading about elephant cognition today. Yeah, they're very smart. Very smart. I don't want to talk about Nietzsche or any continental philosophy or anything that's vaguely potentially related to Jewish material. So let's talk about the topic, and if there's a tangent that's related to the topic specifically, we could talk about those. But no, I don't want to talk about Nietzsche. In general, I disagree with most of the stuff that he says. So we can just Leave it at that. When we talk about what is left. So we have Cassander, who's in Greece, and he's got the family, right? He's got the kids, or the kid, the king, and Roxana. And then we've got Lysimachus, one of these big guys, and he's basically got the northern part of the Balkans and a chunk of Asia Minor. And then we've got Antigonus, who has been greatly diminished, that has part of the Asia Minor chunk and basically the Mediterranean coastline, what we would call the Levant. And then we've got Seleucus with this giant chunk of territory, which is Mesopotamia and Asia, and we've got Ptolemy down in Egypt. So we've got 5 people left. So what do we do? Well, we could, if everybody were, an adult, or if everybody were, chill, we could probably figure out a way to make this all work. Maybe sit around the fire and, hang out and talk like we're friends, like we used to be, and work out our differences and, just kind of hang out. That's absolutely not what happens. Suddenly, after the Third War of the Diadochi, and with very little warning, Roxana and Alexander IV get murdered. Now, what happened there? They were under house arrest being protected by Cassander. Could it be that Cassander just murdered them to get them out of the way because he didn't want them being around anymore and he wanted to be a king in his own right? Well, that's pretty much what everybody thinks. Now, Cassander, of course, goes, "Oh, no, I would never kill the son of Alexander. That was our liege lord. I would never do anything like that." We don't know exactly what happened. We just know that they get murdered and Cassander gets the blame. Now, this means that there's no more of Alexander's line, right? There are no more people in his bloodline. His half-brother is gone. His son's gone. His wife is gone. The whole Alexander thing is gone. So now, if you've got land, you don't even have to pay lip service to the fact that you're still following Alexander. You can just be your own king, right? You could just be your own king. And when that happens, we don't have to pretend like we're friends anymore, right? Because as long as Alexander's bloodline was on the throne, you had to kind of nod and give the hat tip to, oh yeah, we're all still part of the same territory and we're all following the same leader and we're going to preserve the empire so that when Alexander IV gets older and can rule by himself, he's going to be our king and we're all going to swear allegiance to this guy. No. Now that he's gone, everybody just starts beating the junk out of each other. And Seleucus decides that he's just going to take out Antigonus. So this is like really rough. The war between Seleucus and Antigonus goes on from 311 to 309. And it's really bad because when Seleucus ends up taking all of Antigonus's land, the other generals that are still around go, oh crap, he's going to be coming for us next, isn't he? Turns out, yes. And this is what starts the Fourth War of the Diadochi. This is the big one. This is the longest of them and the most bloody of them. What's up, Theo? Good to see you. The Fourth War of the Diadochi runs from 308 to 301. And this is a big, big war. And so much stuff is up for grabs. Ptolemy, down in Egypt, decides that what he wants to do is expand his territory towards Greece and Macedonia. Because this is sort of like the heartland, right? This is the place where all of this started. But to get from Egypt to here, he would have to go through this little bit of chunk that Antigonus has left, which isn't very much, and he ends up dying pretty quickly after that. Seleucus, right? Then Lysimachus, and then Cassander. Or Ptolemy could build a navy. And what he could do is take over all of these islands in the Aegean and use those as bases to attack directly into Greece or directly into Macedon. So this is kind of bypassing all those crazy people over in Asia, because if he can just go straight at the heartland, he should just go straight at the heartland. And this is what Ptolemy does. He starts taking these islands. Now, I am the king, I am the king, I am the king works differently than I am Spartacus, right? How are ships at this time? They're pretty solid. The Greeks and the Macedonians had really well-developed ships, right? Oars and square sails. Yes, absolutely. This is before we had multi-level rigging. This is before we had like triangular sail rigging and stuff like that. It would just be a single mast that could be raised or lowered, but it's fixed. So it's either down or up. You're not going to you're not going to move this very much. And the sail goes up or down. It's not going to be one that's necessarily like where you can move it to half sail and like tilt it sideways and do all the fancy stuff like on, ships that had sails from the 1500s, right? Yeah, no outboard engines. Single mast. So Ptolemy's going to be looking at the Mediterranean. Seleucus is really interested in holding the land that he has, because when he moves all of his army over to fight these other guys, the stuff that happens back in the eastern part of his territory starts attracting his attention. He's losing land in Asia, and he needs that land in Asia because of the money and the power that it represents. So Seleucus has to split his attention. He has to fight a little bit over here, but also a little bit over there. And it's a messy problem, right? It's a really, really messy problem, because you can't move your armies across these distances very rapidly. So Seleucus is fighting battles over here and over here at the same time that he's also fighting battles over here and over here. Lots of distance in between, right? Lots of distance in between. Did they have enough timber to build the navy? Yeah, sure. So the timber trade is something that Egypt usually has to import, but there were substantial amounts of places where you could acquire timber to build a navy. It was very expensive, but it was doable. And Ptolemy had Egypt, which is, just stock full of food and is effectively the single greatest area of food production in the Mediterranean world. So he had the money to spend to build the navy in the first place. So that's a fair question, though. Egypt is not necessarily known for its sprawling forests, right? So when Antigonus loses all of this land, he decides to kind of make a kill shot. And he sees that Ptolemy is spreading towards Greece. And Antigonus decides that what he's going to do is he's going to be the one that takes out Cassander. So Antigonus is going to save face, right? He's going to show that he actually was a legitimate follower of Alexander, despite what all these other Diadochi said. And he's going to show that he was the one that's going to avenge Alexander IV's death. And he's going to go kill this villain Cassander. And to do this, he's going to send his son. Now, Antigonus could have theoretically gone to Greece himself, but that would have been really risky. And you don't really want to do that, because that's putting yourself on the front line. And you know that you've got Seleucus breathing down your neck, and Lysimachus is licking his chops, and Ptolemy is trying to box you in. So taking a frontline command, maybe not the best time to do that if you're a general. So his son goes to Greece, and his son's name is Demetrius. And he tells his son, look, you go to these Greek cities, they already don't like Cassander because he's a jerk. Nobody really likes Cassander. And the Greek cities were already looking to rebel, right? Athens had just rebelled about 2 decades prior and had been smashed down in the Lamian War. So you go to all these Greek cities and you tell them that I will give them back their independence if they join with you and your force and go kill Cassander. And this actually works out pretty well for Antigonus because, again, nobody likes Cassander. So there's a big old war in in Greece. And while that's going on, Lysimachus decides that it's time for him to take more land. And he can do this because Seleucus is now fighting on two fronts. And if Lysimachus expands into territory that Seleucus controls, well, that's going to make Seleucus fight on three fronts, and he knows that he can't stretch himself that far. So Lysimachus moves over into his Asia Minor region and starts taking over more stuff in what we would call modern-day Turkey. So all of these wars and battles are kind of moving around at the same time. And when one person goes here, that leaves a gap for these other people to go there. And then when they go there, this leaves this gap for this other group to go over here. And you end up with basically everybody fighting everybody everywhere. Now, this is going to sort of show down at this really big battle at a place called Ipsus. And in this battle, we have Antigonus and his forces versus Cassander, Lysimachus, and Seleucus. So we've got 3 of the big 5 versus 1 of the big 5. And Antigonus ends up getting killed in the battle. Now, that doesn't necessarily end his line, because remember, his son has this Greek group of people that are supporting him, and Demetrius ends up getting back to Greece and rallies a whole bunch of troops over there and starts trying to cause more trouble. Now, when that happens, who gets to take the stuff? Because Antigonus did have some land. Who gets the land? Well, Cassander goes, well, I mean, I helped kill the guy, so I should get some of the land. And Lysimachus and Seleucus are like, dude, we already had this drawn out before we even invited you to the party, so you get none of this. And that makes Cassander pretty mad. Pretty mad. But what is he going to do? He can't project his power all the way over into what is modern day, Syria, Israel, or Lebanon, because his power base is in Greece, and he doesn't have any contiguous connection to this area, so he can't gripe too much. And Lysimachus is between him and this territory, and if he gets past Lysimachus, he gets to Seleucus, and Seleucus is the biggest of the bunch. So he just kind of gets mad. Any scope to withdraw? Yeah, like, could we just back up and be nice? No, nobody wants to back up and be nice. So what are we left with? Well, we are left with this. And let's kind of move ourselves a little bit through the scope here. Now, looking at the yellow, this territory ends up being the territory of Seleucus, and he pretty clearly gets a big old chunk of it. Lots and lots of this territory. This is including some of the largest cities on Earth, and this is including multiple cities along the Silk Road. We can see over here Alexandria Escate. Escate is the furthest. The furthest. So the furthest Alexandria. And this ties directly into the Silk Road, which runs through here and runs through here and runs right down through here and then up Mesopotamia and over. So all of this territory is just churning out money for Seleucus. Money and power. What's in Herat? A bunch of really rich people. This is a really super big trading city that is on the on one of these trade routes that comes out of India and comes up from the Indian Ocean and Persian Gulf. Herat is super big trade city. Goes on. I mean, it's still around today. There's a lot of stuff over there today. Not as big and as important as it used to be, but it used to be like a super big city. Yeah. This is the good stuff, right? Now, kind of in what we might call position number 2, we have Ptolemy, who had turned his position in Greece in the Mediterranean into territory on land. And he's going to get Egypt, which is nothing to scoff at, right? And he gets this region right here called Cilicia and the island of Cyprus and this part of the coastal territory of the Mediterranean. So Ptolemy comes out looking pretty nice. Now up here, we have Lysimachus. And he's got some cool stuff, but if we're just going to be honest, he doesn't have as much as he wanted. So here's where the Battle of Ipsus is in modern-day Turkey. This is the big battle where Antigonus dies, and they sort of split all of his territory up. So Thrace, the Black Sea coastline, and this region right here called Ionia, this is the good stuff for Lysimachus. Now look, Cassander's still around. He's got his own chunk of territory over here. It's not necessarily a big piece, but he's still got some of it. And he doesn't really like the fact that that's all that he has. Now, what happens to these people? Well, let's start here. Cassander dies in 297. And when he dies, his kingdom falls apart. Mostly because everybody hated Cassander. He does have lots of olives, and that's actually a really important trade good in the ancient world. The pink is a guy named Pyrrhus, who you might recognize as the king of Epirus. So this is Epirus. If you've ever heard of a Pyrrhic victory, this is when Rome fought against Pyrrhus of Epirus. They had moved over here and invaded and were trying to take over this area and won the war, but ended up hurting themselves dramatically in the process. So even though they finger quote won, they didn't really win. But this is the kingdom of Epirus, ruled by a guy named Pyrrhus, who was a Hellene, and sort of part of this larger discussion, but he played a fairly minor role, so we kind of left him out. Anyway, when Cassander dies in 297, his kingdom crumbles, and the guy that ends up taking over most of this is a dude that's Antigonus' son, Demetrius, who had a territory over here, and he ends up conquering Macedon and setting himself up as a ruler. And he's going to claim that he is the successor of the Alexander's kingdom. Now, obviously, he's not from Alexander's bloodline, so this isn't going to be, Alexander's dynasty. This is the Antigonid dynasty, but there's an Antigonid kingdom here in Macedon for quite some time after this. All of these Greek city-states are going to basically break Greece back up into their little city-state territory. Lysimachus is going to end up losing most of his territory when Seleucus takes it over. There's a big battle between those two at a place called Corupedium in 281. And Lysimachus is going to get killed in the battle, and Seleucus is going to take over all of Asia Minor. And there's a little bit of Thrace up here that sort of just turns into independent kingdom again. That really just leaves Ptolemy and Seleucus. They're kind of the only ones that really make it all the way through. And even they fight. And they fight specifically about this territory down here in the Levantine region and in Syria. Egypt is going to lose control over most of this area to Seleucus, but they're going to hold out down here. And the Ptolemies are going to end up holding on to Egypt all the way through until Rome takes over Egypt under Caesar Augustus in the early AD period. So for the next 300 years, the Ptolemaic dynasty is going to rule in Egypt. Seleucus and his dynasty is going to come the closest to putting Alexander's empire back together. At the height of the Seleucid Empire, they're going to have all of Asia Minor. They're going to have most of this land here in the Sinai up and over. They're going to have some of these islands here and they're going to have all of the Asia territory and all the Mesopotamia territory. And the Seleucids are going to last all the way up through into the time period where they're running into the Romans, and the Seleucids are actually going to last. Well, I guess it depends on how you say they last. They last more or less into the period of expansion where Rome gets over into this region in the 100s, and then the Seleucids, who control basically just a little bit of territory, are pretty much going to shrivel up and die. They lose a lot of territory pretty fast. So that's what ends up happening to all these Diadochi. Now, I know that this is a weird period of time where, as some people in chat have said, like, we don't talk about any of this stuff very much. This is not necessarily the super sexy, high-flying, flashy parts of history. This is fascinating stuff. This has a big impact on the way that the rest of the world operates. If you are a follower of Western culture, this has a big impact on you. If you are a believer in some of the big, like Judeo-Christian lines of religion, this is going to have an impact on you. If you are a person that cares about Zoroastrianism, this has a big impact on you. If you care about interconnected globalization at the height of the Roman period, this is going to have an impact on you. So, like, all of this stuff gets sort of leapt over. Even when I'm teaching this in World Civ, Alexander gets a day, right? And then this leads into a transitionary period and ends up turning into Rome the next day, right? So it's not really the sexy stuff, but I love it. I love all these periods of time. I think that if there were a person that had enough money and wanted to make a really good series that was Game of Thrones-esque, but based on actual history, this period of time would be an excellent area where you could get really colorful characters, really big, flashy battle scenes, lots of intrigue, behind the back wheeling and dealing and stabby stuff. This would be really fascinating to make a series out of. And I think you could do 2 or 3 seasons of this, where at the end of each season you had like one of the big culminating battles, right? Yeah, no dragons, but lots of cool stuff, right? What's going on in Saudi Arabia at this time? There was not an empire down there. It was inhabited, but it wasn't organized. There was not a state down there. The Arabian tribes were just kind of wandering around. I don't even know if there were too terribly many big cities down there. There were some trade hubs, these places that are called caravanserais, which is basically just a big crossroads on some trade stuff where people were almost always going to be found. But there were there were not big empires down in Arabia at this time. Lights a big for Zoroaster, yeah, because of the fire, right? I'm down there. I'm down there. Game of Thrones of Carthage. We've covered Carthage. We had a couple of streams about Carthage. You've heard snippets of this, but definitely nothing in depth. No dragons. Who will watch it? Let's add some Greek dragons, right? Yeah, Greek dragons. There is such thing called Greek fire, but that's a little bit later and has nothing to do with actual dragons and everything to do with what's effectively ancient napalm. So, a little bit of a different scenario there. But that is the story. If I were a Diadochi, who would be the closest resemblance to me? PMAT, that's a great question. Probably Ptolemy. Ptolemy was very clear that he got what he wanted early on, and he made his moves early on while everybody was still squirrely and running around. And once he got what he wanted, he never really wanted to stick his neck too far out. he could have, if he wanted to, been much more involved in a lot of these big battles, but he knew that he had security by holding on to Egypt, and he was pretty much okay letting everybody else do their thing. And if we look at which of the dynasties that came out of the wars of the Diadochi that were the most stable, the Ptolemies are by far the most stable. The Seleucids last, a very long time, but their territory expands and shrinks, and they have civil wars and internal backstabbing, and like it's messy in the Seleucid world. And I think part of that is because Ptolemy the first, whose subname is Soter, but anyway, he ends up spending most of his time solidifying his rule and establishing himself as a person that was worthy of following and listened to people. And while he was in charge, right, he also didn't decide that he needed to just destroy Egyptian culture, right? He had sculptures of himself made as a pharaoh. He had inscriptions of stuff written in hieroglyphics, right? So he was a Greek or a Hellene, but he wasn't like, you must be Hellenic or else. Whereas the Seleucids, one of the biggest issues that they had was Seleucus was all about pushing, you will be Hellenic or else. And this is causing a lot of problems in his territory, especially the stuff that's really far out in Central Asia. Because those people didn't really have a lot of exposure to Hellenic world, right? And while they did get connections through all of this stuff, that doesn't mean they necessarily wanted to immediately abandon their way of life. But the Greeks and the Egyptians had been closely related historically for, at this point, thousands of years. So they had a lot of shared culture and trade anyway. And Ptolemy was just like, I'm going to make myself a little house, and I'm mostly going to stay in my house. And if I can do some little moves that are going to make big payoffs, I'll do that. But I'm not necessarily going to gamble at all. Whereas people like, Cassander or Lysimachus throw lots of stuff in and then end up losing a lot of stuff out of it. Poker commentator, welcome in, says flying war elephants. That would be great. I don't know what we would do with flying war elephants, though. That would be hard to CG, because those would have to be some pretty big wings. Kind of Alex's fault for putting the entire Middle East's breadbasket into the hands of one guy. Arternicus, welcome in, and good to see you. So the biggest problem, and this is what we covered back at the beginning of the stream, was that Alexander didn't leave anybody in charge. And he had this rotating system of generals that was specifically designed to keep one person from being able to be in charge. So when he died, it was a free-for-all to try to take over as much as you could put your hands on. Elephants fly with their ears. Everyone knows that. Right, we could just have... Oh, and then Disney would sue our pants off, right? For copyright infringement on Dumbo. I don't think our prospective TV show needs to run afoul of Disney that early on, right? Elephants flying with their ears probably is a big no-go. Plus, the Indian elephants tend to have smaller ears than the African elephants, so they would have to flap those at much harder rates of speed. I just don't think it would work for them. Were the Egyptians pretty chill under Ptolemaic rule, or were there uprisings through that time that had to be put down? So the Ptolemies had ups and downs. And part of the problem that the Ptolemies developed was they went through phases of, we're going to be Hellenic, and then people that were like, oh, no, we've pushed Hellenism too far, we need to back up and be more Egyptian. And they had a hard time balancing that, right? And at times when they were going really hard on the Hellenic culture stuff, a lot of the people in Egypt weren't particularly happy. A lot of people, especially the rich people that were like the priests and the head of the big priesthoods that were, at this point, thousands of years old, had a lot of sway over the common people, right? So that caused some issues. Another problem in the Ptolemaic dynasty is the fact that, and I'm not trying to be rude or wrong here, Arturnicus, thank you so much for the follow. And welcome to the adventure. One of the biggest issues with the Ptolemies was the fact that they were incredibly inbred. They had a fairly common practice of marrying brothers to sisters, or marrying daughters to uncles, or nephews to aunts. And they did this theoretically to avoid outside powers trying to weasel their way into powerful positions. But what this also did was it just made huge factions within the family. And when everybody's related to everybody, and the person that's theoretically in charge dies, that also means everybody has a legitimate claim to the throne because they're that person's, cousin brother, right? And it gets really messy, especially by the time we get to like Ptolemy the 7th and Ptolemy the 8th. Messy is not even the word to describe it. If you want to, there's a stream that I've done that's on the YouTube channel that talks about the Ptolemies, and I know that I've already put that one up, or at least I think I've put that one up. Now that I say that, I don't know if I've put that one up. Oh bother, I don't know if I've put that one up or not. There is one. All of my VODs are on Twitch, and you can go find them on the Twitch VOD page, but it's a little bit harder to navigate because it's kind of messy. Puff the War Dragon will sell more videos than Dumbo flying with his ears. Puff the War Dragon. That's not the kind of Puff that I think most people would have thought about when they heard Puff the Dragon. Little Ptolemy paper, right? I was that guy's dad and brother and double first cousin. I should rule. And see, that's part of the problem, Rexler. You're not really describing something that's inaccurate here, right? At one point, there's like 3 different people that can rule, and they all have the same amount of claim to the throne. But I don't know. It's just so messy. It's really messy. What's up? PMET says, sometimes I feel like human policy is so contrarian to basic biology. Yeah, I mean, part of it is, right? Part of it is. We get wrapped up in the trappings of power and we do dumb stuff, right? Lots of people will do dumb things because they want the power, right? Okay. Does anybody have any additional questions or want to do any point redemptions or anything like that? We are... Oh man, I missed 2 followers. How did I miss 2 followers? Holy crap. Conebone, thank you so much for the follow. And Buy Apple Tater, thank you for the follow. I can't believe that I missed that. I hope that you're both still here and didn't just think that I was a giant jerk because I didn't say hello to you and thank you for the follow. Holy smokes. How did I miss 2 follows? I've got to figure out this audio thing. I've really got to figure this out. And both of these people have now left the chat because they followed and I didn't say thank you. Man, that stinks. That stinks really bad. Alas. So I fixed it to where people can hear it. But I can't hear it. So, yeah. What's up, Casey? I looked at your channel last night, Casey, and you had like 165 people in there. And I'm sure you're going to say it's because it's a raid. But yeah, we all know that you're just killing it. Matt wants to see the puppy. All right, let me call the puppy. Give me just a second. I am certain at this point that the puppy is asleep, so it might take her a little while because she is probably snoozing on the couch. but let me fetch the puppy. Sorry. Sorry. Um, I hit the button and apparently it just didn't work. But here comes the puppy anyway. So let's just talk about puppies. Come and see me. Come here. There's the puppy. And she's got her Pop-Tart. The Pop-Tart is one of her favorite toys. Hey, where are you going? Gotta come here. Come here and say hello to me. It used to squeak, but it no longer squeaks because she destroyed the squeaky part of it. She is quite vicious with her toys. Oh, that's a good girl. Yeah, what you doing? Are you asleep? Taking a nap? Okay, we're being told that we're not worthy, and the puppy has decided to just leave. Sorry about that. When she gets to the point where she's asleep and we have to like wake her up and she comes in, it's just like you're going to get about 45 seconds of puppy and then she's going to nope out pretty quick. Okay. So let me answer this question. Ancient power does tend to run through heredity, but it doesn't always. There are plenty of examples where it doesn't. Like any of the tribal people in Central Asia, like Mongols or Go Turks or Khazars or the original Bulgars or anything like that, the authority that you gave was to an individual. And when that person died, their children were not guaranteed to get the same support because I made a deal with that person. Just because I made the deal with that person doesn't mean I make the same deal with their children. Going back to the Arabs, this is the same thing for the Arabs. As an example I could give you specifically, Muhammad, the guy that started Islam, made a lot of alliances among Arabian tribes. And then when he died, a lot of those Arabian tribes were like, okay, well, you know, the deal is now done. And the second caliph, this guy named Abu Bakr, had to run around and beat up a lot of Arabian tribes going, no, no, no. You didn't make a deal with Muhammad. You made a deal with Allah, right? You made a deal with God. So just because Muhammad died doesn't mean you get to go back off and do your own thing. You're still part of the community, the Ummah, and we're going to hold you to that promise regardless. Because their tradition was, I made a deal with Muhammad. Muhammad is dead. The deal is done, right? So if the next guy wants to come and, you know, make a deal with me, that's okay. But I'm not guaranteed to follow his son or his daughter or anything like that just because. So not always following hereditary lines, but it's a pretty usual thing. It's a very common thing. All right. Was there much going on in the rest of the true Balkans at this time? Yeah. There's a lot of stuff going on up there. Lots of people, trade routes, migratory groups coming through. Celtic people still in the Balkans during this time period to a certain extent. Not very many, but a little bit. Not too many terribly big cities, but I mean, there's a population up there. I had other graphics over the top of the screen, so we heard the alerts, but we didn't see them on screen. Interesting. I wonder what that was. Was that maybe an image? Oh, yeah, it was. have my my thing here. Streamlabs is supposed to be on top of that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, well, that was a dumb move of me. Complete tangent. You watched Hathaway and you loved it. I haven't seen it. I tend to not like Universal Century stuff kind of in general, and I especially don't like Universal Century stuff that's got giant, overly pointy mech designs. And these giant ships were the planks nailed. Sometimes yes, other times using wooden pegs. Almost always using pitch to seal it, though. It's been happening to us as well. It's a glitch on the Twitch's side. Interesting. Puff was a crossover? Really? Interesting. Puff was a crossover of what? I'm muted. I'm so far behind in chat. Offers a silent rebuttal in semaphore. I don't even remember what I was saying. You always wake me up for what reason? Pretty much yes. Shmona, good to see you. Welcome in. Did the Diadochi have Diadogis? I'm sure they did. The Greeks were actually very fond of their dogs. And I have multiple pictures of gravestones where people included their dogs, or specifically gravestones that were for dogs, because the Greeks loved their pets. They really did. The warhound has arrived, the harbinger of the end times. The puppy does make the rules. Toys that used to squeak, correct, right. Withdraw and consolidate. Not a very Diadochi move there, right? Was that what? I don't know. Why didn't the interest of Alexander and the Diadochi turn in the directions of the Balkans at all? Because there were people there, but there wasn't money there. The people groups that lived in places like the Carpathian Mountains or the Danube River Valley, or larger regions that we might call today, like all of the Serbia region, Montenegro, Slovenia, there weren't really big cities there. The populations weren't really high. And where there aren't big cities, there's not good trade. And if you look at the population densities, if you go this way is moving back towards the ancient world, towards Mesopotamia, towards Egypt. There are way bigger cities in this direction than anything was this way, right? Carthage was probably the biggest city in the western half of the Mediterranean at that point. And it and Rome and no, there weren't even any Etruscan cities that were still very big at this point, or even around at this point. But the idea is, like, this is where the cool stuff was, right? You go this way. You have watched Anne Hathaway and you like that. She's a good actress. Yes, I don't really like pointy mobile suits, and I don't really like new types. Was pitch readily available? Yeah, so you could find pitch pretty much anywhere, and it was imported, and it was sold as a trade good. And you could use it for a variety of things. But if the people were going to be making ships, they were going to have access to pitch for sure. Okay, hey, I caught up. Matt wanted to do poppies. All right. Warning, KP, here comes poppies. Hello, everybody. After a long and tiring stream where a whole bunch of people beat the mess out of each other and assassinated children and killed people, isn't it nice to just take a moment and be calm and listen to the beautiful music? I like the music. It makes me feel calm. I don't actually hear the music. I'm just sitting in an empty room with a whole bunch of lights on and talking very softly into a microphone for your enjoyment. And I hope that you enjoy it. Be like Poppies, my friends. There we go. There's poppies. So if Ptolemy's building a navy, the spies there will see timber, pitch, and nails imported in bulk. For sure. Oh, yeah. Everybody knew that he was building a navy. Everybody knew that he was going for the islands. Like, it was not a secret plan. Right? Right? The poppies are a nice counterpoint to the general bloodbath. Right. Right. Poppies ain't invading anybody. No, they aren't. They're just going to chill out on the hillside, and we're going to get to look at them, and it's going to be pleasant and happy. And everybody gets to hug, right? And wrap up in a cozy blanket. All right. All right, everybody. If there are no further questions, we can go see who's around to raid. Poppies are a bit more chill than puppies. That's very true. Puppies are a mess and don't always play well. Those particular poppies have been watered with blood at least once. I doubt it. I doubt it. Right. What's the most boring period in history? Oh, man. That's going to hurt. I don't know in general. I can tell you the area that I will avoid if I can avoid it. This doesn't mean I don't know anything about it. This just means it's not necessarily my favorite stuff to study. I really don't like studying European royalty, especially in Eastern and Southern Europe from the 1700s to the 1900s. That is among the areas that I am least knowledgeable about, and I don't spend a lot of time. Like, if you ask me who's the king of Serbia in 1890, actually might not. No, I don't know that one for sure. Right. For a second there, I was like, oh, I actually do know that. But no, I don't. Or how did the Hungarian monarchy relate to the Polish monarchy in the 1700s? I could tell you in general terms, but that's not my world. I don't dislike it. It's just so convoluted and like minuscule, right? You have to like remember that this person is connected to 7 other people, and this person is the grandson of that person who was the first cousin of that person who was the king of this, and this is why this person hates that person, and all of the nobility just gets so controlled. And it, like, if you look at a map of the Holy Roman Empire from like 1750, and you look at all the different little polities that made up the Holy Roman Empire, it looks like someone made a Jackson Pollock painting into a map, because there's a bajillion different little groups of people, and they all have titles, and they're all nobles, and all of them want to be this, or are the 4th cousins of those people, or the grandchildren of those people. And again, I don't dislike the fact that this is an important part of history. I just avoid it, because if you get into it, it is very difficult to make headway in research for a lot of that stuff. And I will find myself in some cases doing the mortal sin of just reading the Wikipedia page, right? Sometimes I'll just read the Wikipedia page, and even that can get confusing at times, right? More of a crossover too, I guess. I'm sure it was Rockers and Stoners and Nom that named an AC-47 Puff. Oh, I see. Many people remember Pete's Dragon. Yes, and Puff the Magic Dragon. No, Pete's Dragon is different because that's Elliot, right? Puff the Magic Dragon is a song, which is from what I can put together, mostly about marijuana. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to get through that stuff. It is not impossible to do. It's just very difficult to do correctly, right? If I could quantum leap into any time period in my lifetime, which would I most like to revisit? That's a great question. If I could go back to when I was in high school and download my current knowledge into my brain so that I would know to grow up and not let certain things bother me and work out anxiety triggers and emotional damage at that point and be able to make wiser decisions as a young adult and still end up with marrying my wife and having my same friends, that would be ideal. That would be great, actually. A lot of the crap that I've had to work through mentally, health-wise speaking, in the last 4 years has been digging through a lot of that stuff and trying to make sense out of it, because it didn't go very well the first time around. I was dumb and angry, and I didn't even know what I was angry about, and that made me make stupid decisions because I was being motivated by a false sense of intelligence and a misunderstanding of how to properly progress through things. There's lots of stupid, immature decisions. We'll just leave it at that. Also, I could buy Bitcoin when they were a penny. That'd be great. But see, I know all the coursework, right? At this point, I could do much better coursework. And I would actually enjoy going back through some of that stuff again. With the knowledge that I have now and writing much better papers. But I'm a giant nerd, right? Giant nerd. If I had the time to go back and rewrite some of the papers that I wrote, I would actually appreciate doing that. Not a lot of people. People are like, wait, you want to go back and rewrite papers? That sounds horrible. Yeah, I mean, I would. Yeah, it's all in my head, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a real impact, right? That's the crazy thing about your brain. Even if it's not real, it doesn't mean it doesn't have an impact. Anxiety. There's nothing stopping you from doing that now. Yeah, time. Time is what's stopping me from doing that now. There would not be a benefit to me rewriting the paper. If I were back in time and I needed the grade, then there would be a reason for me to rewrite the paper. Skipping the unfortunate bits while keeping my current... Yeah. Right? El Salvador has Bitcoin as a portion of their national treasury backing. They don't actually use Bitcoin as their national currency. They have invested heavily in that to back part of their currency valuation. And it was pretty sketchy. And it crashed their economy, and it's still fluctuating fairly wildly and not necessarily working out in the best way. Note to self, never play trivia against Shane. Never in my life would I have remembered that Pete's dragon is Elliot. Yeah, and they were in Passamaquoddy. I mean, I'm weird like that, Uncle Bill. I'm weird like that. I hold on to weird little trivia details. That's just the way that my brain works. But in the same way, I remember all of the horrible stuff too. So it's kind of like a balance, right? I can win at bar trivia, but I can also remember something that somebody said to me, 20 years ago, and then still feel the same way that I did when I felt it back then. So pluses and minuses, right? Pluses and minuses. Who are we going to go raid? Let's go raid Cryo. We haven't raided Cryo in a little bit. Following. Yes. Okay. we're going to go raid Cryomera, who is friend of the stream and one of the biggest reasons that I am still streaming on Twitch. One of the reasons I made affiliate and kept going even after things were really kind of like lame in the beginning is because of Cryomera. So let's go throw some love in Cryo's direction. Yell adventure when we get there, and share some emotes if you got them. Thanks for everybody for coming by. Lots of good chat, lots of good questions. Hope everybody had a good time. Thank you to all of my subscribers, Cindy Semiotics. Thank you for dropping the betays earlier and subscribing. We had Aristotle with a raid, which was really nice. Tuna resubscribed. Thank you for that. Let me also say thanks to people that have supported me in other ways. I do have a Patreon. You can see the command there if you want to. My patrons. Thanks to all of the patrons and people that have been very kind and sent me books to further the giant stack of books that I read, that I get lots of little factual data from. Thanks to everybody that has fed my reading habit. There's a fairly decent chance that I'll be around this weekend, probably building a Gundam, maybe chatting, answering questions. But until then, everybody, I hope that you have a good one, and I'll see you next time.